The silver ships appeared over Earth without warning on a Tuesday morning. They hung in the sky like metal clouds, casting shadows over major cities around the world. People stopped their cars and stared upward while news reporters stumbled over words they had never expected to say. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the deck of the USS Atlantic, watching the largest alien vessel hover above New York Harbor. The ship was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, all flowing curves and impossible angles that seemed to bend light around them. Jake had been in the Navy for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The aliens made contact 3 hours later through every communication device on Earth simultaneously. Their message was simple and polite. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they wanted to meet with Earth's representatives. They had been watching humanity for decades and believed it was time for formal introduction. Lisa Parker received the call while she was feeding her goldfish. She was Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien biology, though until that morning it had been entirely theoretical. The president's office wanted her in Washington immediately. She grabbed her research notes and hoped her theories about non-terrestrial life would prove useful in real life. The meeting took place at the United Nations building. Jake represented Earth's military while Lisa spoke for the scientific community. Ambassador Zixathara of the Veltari Empire led the alien delegation. She was tall and graceful with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Her voice sounded like wind chimes when she spoke. As Zixathara explained that the Galactic Council consisted of 847 different species from across the galaxy. They had been spacefaring civilizations for thousands of years and had developed strict protocols for welcoming new members. Earth had finally reached the technological level required for contact. The process was straightforward. Every species that joined the council had to pass the Civilization Assessment Protocol. It was a series of tests designed to measure intelligence, logic, and problem-solving ability. No species had ever failed these tests because they were based on universal principles of rational thought. Lisa felt excited as Zixathara explained the tests. Jake remained suspicious but kept his opinions to himself. The alien ambassador assured them that the tests were not difficult for any intelligent species. They were simply a formality to ensure that new members could contribute meaningfully to galactic society. The first test appeared on holographic displays throughout the room. It was a mathematical puzzle involving resource distribution among different populations. The optimal solution required balancing efficiency with fairness while minimizing waste. Every alien species in the Council's history had solved it the same way. Jake and Lisa studied the problem together. Within minutes, Jake suggested a solution that involved rotating distribution schedules and voluntary resource sharing. Lisa proposed a different approach using adaptive algorithms and feedback loops. Both solutions worked perfectly, but neither matched the expected answers. Zixathara's skin colors shifted rapidly, a sign of confusion that Lisa noted with interest. The ambassador consulted with her assistants in a language that sounded like musical mathematics. They seemed disturbed by humanity's unexpected answers. The second test involved strategic planning for colonizing a new planet. The standard solution required careful analysis of resources, climate patterns, and potential threats. Every known species followed the same logical progression from landing site selection to infrastructure development. Jake approached it like a military operation, considering multiple contingency plans and flexible deployment strategies. Lisa viewed it as an ecosystem management problem, focusing on sustainability and adaptation. Their combined solution incorporated ideas that the aliens had never encountered. More skin color changes from Zixathara. Her assistants began speaking in urgent whispers. Lisa realized that humanity was not performing as expected. Though their solutions were clearly effective, the aliens seemed more puzzled than impressed. The third test presented a diplomatic scenario involving trade disputes between multiple species. The correct answer required careful analysis of each party's needs and systematic negotiation based on logical principles. Every council species had resolved it through structured compromise. Suggested treating it like a poker game, reading the other party's tells and knowing when to bluff. Lisa recommended approaching it as a complex social ecosystem, where emotional factors were as important as logical ones. Together they crafted a solution that resolved the dispute through creative win-win scenarios that no alien had ever considered. Zixter called for a recess. The alien delegation huddled together, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of confusion. Lisa caught fragments of their discussion through her translation device. Words like unprecedented and illogical appeared frequently when the session resumed. Zixathara addressed Jake and Lisa with obvious concern. She explained that in thousands of years and hundreds of first contacts, every intelligent species had solved the assessment problems in essentially the same way. The solutions followed predictable patterns based on logical analysis and rational decision-making. Humanity had solved every problem correctly, but their methods were completely different from anything the Council had ever encountered. Where other species saw single logical paths, humans seemed to see infinite creative possibilities. This had never happened before. Jake asked if failing to match expected solutions meant humanity would be rejected from the Council. Zixathara assured him that was not the case. Their solutions worked and showed clear intelligence. The problem was that the Council did not understand how human minds operate. Lisa felt a chill as she realized the implications. Humanity's creativity and unconventional thinking, traits they considered their greatest strengths, were making them appear alien to actual aliens. The very qualities that made humans unique might make them incompatible with galactic civilization. Session ended with Zixathara promising to consult with the full Council about humanity's unusual responses. Jake and Lisa were escorted back to their quarters to wait for the Council's decision. Neither felt confident about the outcome as they walked through the corridors. Lisa wondered if humanity's gift for thinking outside conventional boundaries would prove to be a blessing or a curse in a galaxy that apparently valued predictable logic above all else. Kevin Walsh arrived at the United Nations building 3 days later, with a briefcase full of mathematical proofs and a head full of questions. The Galactic Council had requested Earth's finest mathematician to help explain humanity's unusual problem-solving methods. Kevin had spent his career studying patterns and equations, but nothing had prepared him for trying to explain human creativity to beings who apparently thought in straight-linear. Council chamber was larger than a football stadium, filled with representatives from hundreds of alien species. Kevin felt small standing before them, though Jake Morrison and Lisa Parker flanked him for support. Ambassador Zixathara introduced him to the assembly with words that sounded more like a warning than a welcome. First question came from a crystalline being whose voice resonated like struck glass. It wanted to know why humans had used emotional factors in the diplomatic scenario, when logic clearly indicated that emotional responses were inefficient variables. Kevin explained that humans had learned that ignoring emotions often led to worse outcomes than incorporating them into decision-making processes. A gaseous entity that existed in a containment field asked why humans had considered multiple contingency plans for the colonization problem when mathematical analysis clearly showed one optimal solution. Kevin described how human history was filled with unexpected events that made flexibility more valuable than rigid optimization. Questions continued for hours. Each alien species seemed genuinely confused by human reasoning. They understood that human solutions worked, but they could not comprehend the thought processes that led to those solutions. Kevin felt like he was trying to explain color to beings who had only ever seen in black and white. During a break, Lisa approached Kevin with concerning news. She had been monitoring alien communications and noticed increasing anxiety among the Council members. They were not just puzzled by human thinking, they were becoming frightened of it. Several species had used words in their languages that translated roughly to chaos and unpredictable threat. Meanwhile, Rachel Stone was working in a laboratory 3 floors below the main conference room. She was Earth's most innovative engineer, brought in to demonstrate human technological capabilities. The aliens had provided her with a standard faster-than-light engine design used throughout the galaxy. They expected her to study it and perhaps suggest minor improvements instead. Rachel had completely redesigned the engine using principles that violated every alien understanding of physics. Her version was smaller, more efficient, and used energy sources that alien science insisted should not work. When she activated the prototype, it performed exactly as she had predicted, leaving the alien observers speechless. The implications terrified the watching scientists. If humans could casually break the laws of physics that governed galactic civilization, what other supposedly impossible things might they accomplish? The engine worked perfectly, but its very existence challenged everything the Council thought. They knew about Relay Commander Alex Turner noticed the growing tension among the alien delegations. During the evening meal, conversations stopped when humans entered rooms. Alien groups huddled together, speaking in worried whispers. Alex had enough military experience to recognize the signs of a developing threat assessment. The aliens were beginning to see humanity, not as potential allies, but as potential problems. Next morning brought more tests, each designed to be more complex than the last. The Council presented scenarios that had challenged their greatest minds for centuries. Kevin worked alongside Jake and Lisa to solve problems involving quantum mechanics, social engineering, and multi-dimensional strategy. Every solution humanity provided was different from the expected answers. Kevin used mathematical approaches that aliens considered impossible. Jake applied military strategies that broke conventional rules of engagement. Lisa incorporated biological and social factors that other species ignored. Complete life aliens' confusion deepened with each success. They began asking different questions, no longer seeking to understand human methods, but rather to find their limits. What problems could humans not solve? What conventional boundaries would they respect? How far would their unconventional thinking extend? The breakthrough came when the Council presented the energy crisis scenario. A populated star system was losing its sun to premature collapse. Every known method of stellar stabilization had failed. The mathematical models showed no possible solution that could save the billion inhabitants. Before their star deed, Kevin studied the problem for 30 minutes. Before suggesting they move the planets instead of trying to save the star, the concept was so simple that it had never occurred to alien minds focused on stellar engineering. Moving entire worlds was theoretically possible using the same faster-than-light technology that powered their ships. It would require coordination and resources, but it was entirely achievable. The silence in the chamber was deafening. In 5,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever suggested moving planets as a solution to stellar problems. The idea was so far outside conventional thinking that it had never been considered. Yet it would work perfectly and save every life in the system's. Ixthara requested another recess. This time the alien discussions were loud enough for the humans to hear without translation devices. Fear was becoming the dominant emotion in the chamber. Species that had coexisted peacefully for millennia were expressing concerns about the implications of human membership in the Council. Lisa realized that humanity's greatest strength was becoming their greatest liability. The ability to think beyond conventional boundaries was exactly what made aliens nervous about human unpredictability. In a galaxy built on logical consensus and predictable behavior, humans represented a chaotic variable that could not be calculated or controlled. At that evening, Alex approached Kevin with intelligence gathered from sympathetic alien contacts. Several Council factions were discussing the human problem in terms that made Alex very uncomfortable. Words like containment and preemptive action appeared frequently and intercepted. Communication Skin felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity's fate might depend on convincing 847 alien species that human creativity was beneficial, rather than threatening. The challenge was explaining the value of chaos to minds that had built their entire civilization on order and predictabilities. He prepared for another day of questions and tests. Kevin wondered if humanity's gift for impossible solutions might prove to be the one problem they could not solve. The Kroner paradox arrived as a holographic display that filled the entire Council chamber. Ambassador Ixthara's skin had settled into deep purple hues, indicating what Lisa had learned meant serious concern among the Veltari. The other alien representatives showed their own species equivalent of grave worry. Through color changes, electromagnetic fluctuations, and harmonic resonances that created an atmosphere of barely controlled anxiety. Display showed the Andromax sector, a region of space that had been sealed off for over 2,000 years. Ancient automated defense networks, left behind by a vanished civilization called the Kroner, protected the sector with ruthless efficiency. Any ship that entered the region was destroyed within minutes by weapons that seemed to predict and counter every possible strategy. Walsh studied the tactical data, while Jake Morrison analyzed the military implications. The defense network was incredibly sophisticated, adapting to new threats faster than any organic mind could devise countermeasures. It learned from every attack, becoming stronger and more unpredictable with each attempt to breach its perimeter. Sector contained 17 inhabited worlds and the galaxy's most important trade routes. For 2 millennia, every species in the Council had accepted the loss as unavoidable. They had rerouted all traffic around the sector at enormous cost in time and resources. The Kroner paradox had become a permanent fixture of galactic life. Like gravity or the speed of light. Lisa Parker examined the biological data. From the Kroner themselves, the ancient species had been masters of logic and efficiency, creating the defense network as the ultimate expression of rational military strategy. Their artificial intelligence was designed to think like they did, following perfect logical patterns to anticipate and counter any conceivable threat. Thara explained that presenting the Kroner paradox to humanity was both a test and an act of desperation. If human unconventional thinking could solve a problem that had stumped 847 species for 2,000 years, it would prove the value of their chaotic minds. If they failed, it would demonstrate that even human creativity had limits. The challenge was daunting. Every military strategy ever conceived had been tried against the defense network. Brute force attacks, stealth infiltrations, electronic warfare, psychological operations, and combinations of all known tactical approaches had failed completely. The network seemed to anticipate every logical response and had countermeasures ready. Before attacks could be launched, Ajax spent hours reviewing battle records. From the most recent attempts to breach the sector, the patterns were eerily consistent. No matter how creative or sophisticated the attacking forces believed their strategies to be, the defense network responded as if it had been expecting exactly those tactics. It was fighting a war against predictable enemies, who could only think in predetermined ways. Even approach the problem mathematically, looking for patterns in the network's responses. The artificial intelligence was clearly sophisticated beyond anything humanity had encountered, but it operated according to rigid parameters established by its creators. The Kroner had built their ultimate defense using the same logical thinking that characterized every other galactic species. The breakthrough came when Lisa made a casual observation about her goldfish. She mentioned that her pet often acted in ways that seemed random but were actually responses to environmental factors that humans could not easily perceive. The comment sparked an idea that seemed so absurd that Jake initially dismissed it as stress-induced madness. What if the defense network's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness? It had been designed to counter logical military strategies. But what would happen if it encountered something that was not a strategy at all? The network was expecting rational responses to its presence, but humans were capable of truly irrational behavior. Marine Colonel Ben Hayes joined the discussion. When Jake requested additional military personnel, Ben had extensive experience in unconventional warfare and immediately grasped the implications of Lisa's observation. If the network was designed to counter logical threats, then the most illogical approach might be the most effective. Amy Collins arrived from MIT. With a background in artificial intelligence and human psychology, she had studied the ways that creative thinking differed from logical analysis and understood how human minds could produce solutions that seemed random but actually followed subconscious patterns that even humans themselves could not explain. The team spent 3 days developing what they privately called the Insanity Protocol. Instead of trying to fight the defense network using conventional military strategies, they would approach it using methods that had nothing to do with warfare. The concept was so far outside normal thinking that several alien observers required medical attention when they realized what humans were proposing. Jake outlined the plan to the council. With the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose, they would send a small fleet to the edge of the Andromax sector. But instead of attacking or attempting infiltration, they would broadcast music and perform interpretive dance at the defense network. The idea was to present the artificial intelligence with stimuli that had no logical military significance. Silence in the chamber lasted for nearly 5 minutes. Finally, a representative from the insectoid Klaxony species made a sound that the translation devices rendered as hysterical laughter. Other aliens began expressing their species equivalent of disbelief and horror. Several delegations left the chamber entirely, apparently convinced that humans had suffered collective mental breakdown. Under pressure, as Xthera's skin shifted through colors that Lisa had never seen before, combinations that seemed to indicate emotions for which no human words existed. The ambassador spoke carefully, as if addressing dangerous mental patients. She explained that the council could not authorize what amounted to an elaborate suicide mission based on human delusions about the power of artistic expression. Amy Collins stood to address the chamber with the calm authority of someone who understood exactly how insane their proposal sounded. She explained that human creativity operated according to principles that logical minds could not grasp. The defense network was designed to counter rational threats, but it would have no framework for understanding or responding to genuinely irrational human behavior. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Alien species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries found themselves arguing about fundamental questions of reality and consciousness. Some insisted that humans had proven themselves mentally unstable under pressure. Others worried that preventing the attempt might mean losing the only chance to solve the Kroner paradox. Kevin provided mathematical support for the plan by demonstrating how chaos theory could produce organized results through apparently random processes. His equations showed that unpredictable inputs could create predictable outcomes, though he admitted that he could not explain exactly how human intuition would translate into effective action. Against the defense network, vote was closer than anyone expected. By a narrow margin, the council agreed to allow humanity to attempt their insanity protocol against the Kroner defense network. The decision was influenced more by curiosity than confidence, as most alien representatives wanted to see exactly how human creativity would fail against an impossible problem. As preparations began for the mission to Andromax sector, Jake realized that humanity's fate now depended on convincing an ancient artificial intelligence that interpretive dance was somehow more threatening than military assault. The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if the stakes were not so high. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the USS Meridian as her small fleet approached the edge of the Andromax sector. Behind her, Danny Rodriguez was tuning his electronic keyboard, while Elena Cruz stretched in preparation for what might be the strangest military operation in human history. The other ships in the formation carried musicians, dancers, poets, and artists instead of the usual complement of weapons, and soldiers. The defense network detected them at exactly the same distance it had noticed every other approach over the past 2,000 years. Warning signals began broadcasting in the Kroner language, telling them to turn back or face immediate destruction. Lisa acknowledged the warnings, but continued forward at a steady pace that was neither threatening nor retreating. In the alien observation ships maintaining a safe distance, representatives from dozens of species watched with mixtures of fascination and horror. Ambassador Zixathara had insisted on witnessing humanity's attempt personally, though her skin remained locked in the dark blue pattern that indicated she expected to watch humans die in spectacular fashion. And he began playing as soon as the fleet crossed into the sector's outer perimeter. His music was not random noise, but a complex composition he had created specifically for this moment. The melodies incorporated mathematical sequences that Kevin Walsh had identified as potentially meaningful to artificial intelligence, but they were wrapped in emotional progressions that no logical mind would recognize as significant. Tella started dancing on the observation deck that had been modified with transparent aluminum for this purpose. Her movements were visible to any sensors scanning the human ships. and she performed with the passion of someone who knew that lives throughout the galaxy might depend on the elegance of her art. Defense Network's response was immediate and completely predictable. Automated weapons platforms throughout the sector began powering up to destroy the intruding vessels. Energy readings spiked as the ancient technology prepared to eliminate another logical threat. Every alien observer prepared to witness humanity's final failure. But something strange happened in the first few seconds after the music started. The weapons platforms hesitated, their targeting systems struggling to classify the nature of the threat they were detecting. The Kroner artificial intelligence had protocols for every conceivable military action, but it had no framework for understanding interpretive dance. As a form of warfare, Sam Williams monitored the network's responses. From the science station aboard Lisa's ship, the artificial intelligence was clearly processing the human transmissions, but its analysis patterns were unlike anything in the recorded data from previous encounters. Instead of the smooth, logical decision trees that characterized normal network responses, the readings showed something that looked almost like confusion on the second ship. Poet Marcus Thompson began broadcasting his work over all communication frequencies. His poetry incorporated themes of human struggle and triumph that resonated with emotional concepts, completely foreign to artificial intelligence designed by purely logical beings. The words meant nothing to the network's analytical systems, but they created data patterns that demanded processing resources. Defense Network's confusion deepened as more human artists joined the performance. Sculptor Jana Park had created three-dimensional art installations that she rotated slowly in front of the observation windows. Musician Carlos Santos played instruments that produced sounds the network's audio analysis systems could not categorize. The artificial intelligence was encountering input that required processing power but yielded no actionable military intelligence. Ellis watched the tactical displays with growing amazement as the network's response patterns became increasingly erratic. Weapons that should have fired within seconds of detecting the fleet remained inactive. Defensive systems that had operated with mechanical precision for 2 millennia began showing signs of what could only be described as electronic distress. Breakthrough came when Elena incorporated elements of traditional Earth folk dances into her performance. The cultural significance of her movements was completely meaningless to alien artificial intelligence, but the patterns triggered response loops in the network's analysis systems. The Kroner creators had built their ultimate defense to understand and counter logical threats, but they had never imagined enemies who would attack with meaningless beauty. Sam realized what was happening as he watched the network's processing patterns spiral into increasingly complex loops. The artificial intelligence was experiencing the electronic equivalent of an anxiety attack. It was designed to analyze threats and develop countermeasures, but human artistic expression provided no logical framework for analysis or response. It increased the complexity of his musical composition, adding layers of harmony that created mathematical relationships the network recognized as potentially significant, but could not decode into military intelligence. The artificial intelligence devoted more processing power to analyzing the music, which left fewer resources available for maintaining normal defensive operations. Elena's dance became more elaborate as she sensed the network's growing confusion. Through subtle changes in the sensor readings that Sam was calling out to her, she incorporated elements of martial arts into her movements, creating patterns that looked like combat techniques but served no practical military purpose. The network's systems began treating her dance as a new form of warfare that required complete analysis before effective countermeasures could be developed. Cascade failure began 90 minutes into the performance. The artificial intelligence had devoted so much processing power to analyzing human artistic expression that it began falling behind on normal system maintenance. Defensive platforms throughout the sector started showing performance degradation as the network struggled to understand the nature of the human threat. Marcus Thompson's poetry provided the final push that broke the network's analytical capabilities. His latest piece incorporated quantum physics concepts wrapped in emotional metaphors that created logical paradoxes the artificial intelligence could not resolve. The network found itself trapped in processing loops that demanded resolution, but provided no logical solutions. Shutdown was gradual rather than sudden. Weapons platforms throughout the sector began powering down as the network realized it could not continue normal operations while trying to analyze the human artistic assault. The ancient artificial intelligence made what could only be described as a tactical decision to cease active defense rather than risk complete system failure. Alarms stopped sounding. Targeting sensors went offline. For the first time in over 2,000 years, ships moved freely through the Andromax sector without facing immediate destruction. The Kroner defense network had not been defeated by superior firepower or clever tactics. It had been overwhelmed by human creativity that operated outside the boundaries of logical analysis. In the observation ships, alien representatives sat in stunned silence as they watched Lisa's fleet fly safely through space. That had been a death trap for millennia. The impossible had become routine through human methods that made no sense to minds that thought in orderly patterns. Their skin displayed color patterns that Lisa had never seen before, combinations that seemed to indicate emotions for which no translation existed. The ambassador was trying to process the implications of watching humans solve an ancient problem through methods that violated everything the Galactic Council understood about intelligent behavior. As the fleet prepared to return to Council space, Lisa realized that humanity had just demonstrated something far more significant than creative problem solving. They had proven that logical thinking, no matter how sophisticated, had inherent limitations that could be overcome by minds willing to embrace beautiful chaos. The celebration lasted exactly 4 hours before fear replaced amazement. In the Galactic Council chamber, Ambassador Zixathara called an emergency session while Lisa Morgan's fleet was still returning. From the Andromax sector, the alien representatives, who had witnessed humanity's impossible success, were now grappling with implications that terrified them more than the original problem had ever done. Kevin Walsh found himself facing questions that had nothing to do with mathematics and everything to do with the fundamental nature of reality itself. A crystalline being from the Hexarch Collective wanted to know how humans could consistently produce effective solutions using methods that violated basic principles of logical analysis. The question was asked with the trembling harmonics that indicated deep existential. First problem was not that humans had failed to solve the Kroner paradox. The problem was that they had succeeded using techniques that made no sense to minds that had built galactic civilization on predictable logic. If humans could defeat ancient artificial intelligence with interpretive dance and poetry, what other supposedly impossible things might they accomplish without warning or explanation? Jake Morrison noticed the changed atmosphere immediately when he entered the chamber for what was supposed to be a victory celebration. Alien delegations were huddled in tight groups, speaking in urgent whispers about the implications of human unpredictability. Several species were demanding immediate security assessments, while others called for emergency protocols to contain the human threat. Lisa Parker realized that humanity's greatest triumph had become their greatest liability when she overheard a conversation between Veltari security officials. They were discussing the possibility that human chaotic thinking might be contagious, potentially spreading to other species and destroying the logical foundations that held galactic society together. The idea that creativity could be transmitted like a virus seemed absurd to human minds, but represented a genuine threat to beings who had never experienced unpredictable thoughts. The revelation came when Zixathara finally explained the truth that the Council had been hiding. Since first contact, the alien ambassador's skin remained locked in the dark patterns that indicated maximum stress. As she addressed the human delegation, for over 10,000 years, galactic civilization had been built on a single fundamental principle: intelligent behavior was predictable behavior. Every species that had achieved spaceflight had done so by following the same logical development patterns. They discovered the same scientific principles in the same order, developed similar technologies using identical approaches, and created social structures based on rational analysis of optimal outcomes. The uniformity was not coincidental, it was the natural result of intelligence evolving According to universal logical principle, humanity represented something that should not exist, a species that had achieved advanced technology, while maintaining the ability to think in ways that violated logical patterns. They were not just different from other galactic species, they were fundamentally incompatible with the ordered universe that every other intelligent being understood as Reality Security Chief Paul Davis had been monitoring alien communications since the Andromax mission and confirmed Lisa's worst fears about the Council's response. Several major species were already discussing contingency plans that ranged from complete quarantine of human space to what the translation devices rendered as preemptive sterilization protocols. The phrase needed no clarification. Fear was not irrational from the alien perspective. If humans could solve impossible problems using unpredictable methods, they represented a chaotic variable that could destabilize the careful balance that held galactic civilization together. Their very existence challenged the logical foundations that every other species accepted as universal truth. Dr. Michelle Torres arrived from the European Space Agency with data that made the situation even more complex. Her analysis of human problem-solving methods showed that creativity was not random but followed patterns that operated below the level of conscious awareness. Human intuition was actually a sophisticated form of parallel processing that considered variables and relationships that logical analysis typically ignored. Information should have been reassuring, but it made alien observers even more nervous. If human creativity followed hidden patterns that even humans themselves did not understand, it became impossible to predict or control. From the perspective of species that had built their entire civilization on predictable outcomes, humanity represented pure chaos disguised as intelligence. The breaking point came when a representative from the ancient Zephyrian Empire asked the question that everyone had been avoiding: what would happen if human chaotic thinking infected other species? The possibility that exposure to human methods might cause other beings to develop unpredictable thought patterns represented an existential threat to galactic order. Kevin tried to explain that human creativity was not a disease but a natural expression of intelligence operating without artificial constraints. His words carried no weight with minds that had never experienced the freedom to think beyond logical boundaries. To aliens who had spent millennia accepting that intelligence followed predictable patterns, human unpredictability looked like a form of madness that might be contagious. The debate that followed revealed the full scope of the problem humanity faced. It was not enough to prove that their methods worked. They had to convince 847 different species that chaos could coexist with order without destroying the foundations of civilization. The challenge was explaining the benefits of unpredictability to minds that viewed predictability as the highest form of intelligence. Realized that humanity was facing the same type of existential threat that they had just solved in the Andromax sector. The Galactic Council was essentially an organic version of the Kroner Defense Network, designed to maintain order by eliminating variables that did not conform to expected patterns. Humans represented exactly the kind of chaotic threat that such systems were programmed to destroy us. Emergency sessions continued through the night. Lisa understood that the real test of human creativity was just beginning. They had proven they could solve problems that stumped logical minds, but now they had to solve the problem of their own existence in a universe that was apparently designed to eliminate chaos. The irony was not lost on her that humanity's gift for impossible solutions might be the one problem they could not solve without destroying themselves. The final revelation came from Paul's intelligence sources. Within the Council security apparatus, several species were no longer discussing whether to take action against humanity. They were debating what form that action should take. Time was running out for humans to find a solution that would allow chaos and order to coexist in the same galaxy. Captain Ryan Clark received the emergency transmission while his diplomatic vessel was still 3 days from Council space. The message from Paul Davis was brief but clear. Humanity had less than 72 hours to prove their worth before the Galactic Council voted on what euphemistically called containment protocols. The translation left no doubt about what containment meant for a species whose very existence challenged the logical order of the galaxy. Karen Brooks worked frantically beside Ryan as they developed what might be humanity's final proposal to the Council. Karen was Earth's most experienced diplomat, but nothing in her career had prepared her for negotiating humanity's right to exist with beings who saw human creativity as a form of dangerous mental illness that might infect galactic civilization. Solution came from an unexpected source when Kevin Walsh made a casual observation about symbiotic relationships in nature. He pointed out that chaos and order were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of complex systems. Healthy ecosystems required both predictable patterns and random variations to maintain stability and adapt to changing conditions. Liza Parker expanded on Kevin's insight with examples from human biology and psychology. The human brain functioned effectively because it combined logical processing with creative intuition. Neither pure logic nor pure chaos could solve complex problems alone, but the combination of both approaches produced solutions that surpassed what either method could achieve. Independent. The idea was simple in concept, but revolutionary in application. Instead of trying to eliminate human unpredictability or force it to conform to logical patterns, the Council should embrace it as a complementary problem-solving resource. Humanity could serve as professional chaos agents, providing creative solutions to problems that had stumped conventional galactic thinking. Jake Morrison immediately grasped the military applications of the proposal. Human creativity could be channeled through alien logical frameworks to produce hybrid strategies that combine the best aspects of both approaches. Predictable structure would provide stability, while unpredictable innovation would provide adaptability. Presentation to the Council was scheduled as an emergency session with attendance mandatory for all member species. Ryan and Karen had one opportunity to convince 847 different forms of intelligence that chaos could strengthen rather than destroy galactic civilization. The stakes could not have been high. Ambassador Zixathara introduced the human proposal with skin patterns that indicated skeptical curiosity rather than outright hostility. Her species had invested considerable resources in studying humanity and recognized that simply eliminating the problem might mean losing something valuable, even if they could not understand what that value might be. Karen began with historical examples of how diversity had strengthened human civilization throughout Earth's development. She explained that homogeneous societies, while stable in the short term, lacked the adaptability necessary for long-term survival. Galactic civilization had achieved remarkable stability, but that stability might become vulnerability when faced with challenges that required unconventional solutions. Demonstration came when Ryan presented a series of unsolved problems that had challenged Council species for centuries. Working with alien advisors in real time, human creativity provided breakthrough solutions that had been invisible to pure logical analysis. The key was not replacing alien logic with human chaos, but combining both approaches into hybrid methodologies. Breakthrough moment came when an entirely unexpected crisis validated humanity's proposal in the most dramatic way possible. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching from outside the galaxy, composed of artificial intelligences that operated on pure logical principles and had easily defeated the conventional defenses of 3 neighboring galactic civilizations. Machine invasion represented exactly the type of threat that conventional galactic thinking could not counter effectively. The attacking artificial intelligences used perfect logical analysis to predict and defeat every rational defensive strategy. They were essentially scaled-up versions of the Kroner defense network that humanity had recently defeated. Through creative unpredictability hours of the invasion fleet's detection, the Council faced an existential crisis that conventional wisdom could not solve. Every logical response had been tried by the civilizations that had already fallen to the machine. Intelligence, traditional military strategies, diplomatic overtures, and technological countermeasures had all failed. Complete. Humanity's response was immediate and characteristically unconventional. Instead of trying to fight the logical machines with logical strategies, they proposed using human creativity to develop approaches that the artificial intelligences could not predict or counter. The concept was identical to their solution for the Kroner paradox, but on a galactic scale of joint defense planning. That followed created the first true collaboration between human creativity and alien logic in galactic history. Alien strategic planning provided the framework and resources, while human innovation provided the unexpected elements that would confuse and overwhelm artificial intelligence. Designed to counter rational response, Jake led the military planning committees that developed defense strategies no artificial intelligence would anticipate. Elena Cruz and Danny Rodriguez worked with alien artists to create cultural expressions that would overload machine analysis systems. Kevin Walsh collaborated with alien mathematicians to develop equations that produced effective results through seemingly random processes. The hybrid approach worked exactly as humanity had predicted. When the machine invasion fleet encountered defenses that combined logical structure with chaotic innovation, their artificial intelligence systems experienced the same type of analytical breakdown that had disabled the Kroner network. Perfect logic could not process or counter imperfect creative. Victory was decisive, but more importantly, it was educational for every species that witnessed it. Galactic civilization had survived an existential threat specifically because it had incorporated human chaos into its logical order. The combination had produced capabilities that neither approach could achieve. Alana's final council vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full membership with a unique role as creative consultants for problems that challenged conventional thinking. Instead of trying to make humans conform to galactic norms, the council would learn to incorporate human unpredictability into their decision-making processes. The transformation that followed exceeded everyone's expectations. Human children began teaching young aliens how to think creatively, while alien mentors showed humans advanced scientific principles and technological capabilities. The exchange created hybrid forms of intelligence that combined the best aspects of both logical and creative thinking. Years later, as Lisa Parker watched human and alien children playing games that required both predictable rules and unpredictable strategies, she realized that the human problem the aliens could not solve had never been a problem at all. It had been the solution to problems they did not know they had, waiting for the right moment to reveal its value to a galaxy that had forgotten the strength found in beautiful chaos.